Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in for a necessary and, frankly, massive conversation.
Massive is the right word.
We're talking about the largest transfer of wealth the world has ever seen. The numbers are they're staggering. We're looking at $124 trillion set to change hands over the next couple of decades.
Right, through 2048.
And if that figure feels, too big to even grasp, you are not alone. It's an economic event that is going to redefine generational wealth, capital markets, everything.
For the next century, easily.
But we aren't here today just to stare at the zeros on a page. We're here for the specialized knowledge, the critical mistakes, and the secrets that high net worth families really need to understand.
And that they so often tragically miss.
To their own detriment, yeah.
That is precisely our mission today. We are moving far beyond the scope of, general financial planning advice you might get anywhere else.
This isn't about setting up a 401k.
Not at all. I mean, when you're managing or inheriting wealth measured in tens, hundreds of millions, or even billions,
Right.
and it involves complex asset structures, international holdings, private businesses, the standard advice, it breaks down.
It's not applicable.
It's not. So our focus is laser sharp. We want to analyze the challenges that are unique to this highly concentrated wealth and pull out the actionable insights that successful families are already using. And it's not just to preserve financial capital.
It's the relational capital, too, the family itself.
Exactly. That's the key.
Okay, let's hit the listener with the sheer scale immediately, because context here is absolutely everything.
Let's do it.
So when we unpack that $124 trillion figure, we see exactly where this capital is flowing and just how quickly the landscape is shifting.
The first number is the big one.
$105 trillion. That's flowing directly to heirs. We're talking actual inheritances that will create, instant philanthropists, instant business owners, instant stewards of just immense assets all over the globe.
And we also need to recognize the philanthropic wave that's coming with this. It's huge.
How much are we talking about there?
Another $18 trillion is earmarked specifically for charitable causes. That will dramatically reshape the global landscape of giving and the influence of private foundations.
Wow.
So this transfer, it represents a massive reorganization of not just capital, but influence. The decision-making power is shifting to a new generation, to new governing bodies. It's a sea change.
The scale is immense, yes, but the concentration of this wealth, that's the truly shocking factor for me.
This is the stat that stops you in your tracks.
Here is the statistic that I think should make every listener recognize why this specialized deep dive is so essential. Over 50% of this massive transfer, we're talking $62 trillion.
That's $62 trillion.
Will come from just 2% of households.
Just think about that.
Think about the gravity of that. A tiny, tiny fraction of the population is responsible for more than half of the world's largest capital movement.
And that one fact, that concentration, it dictates the entire conversation we're about to have.
It really does.
It validates why we have to look past, standardized wills and simple trusts. If 2% of households are moving $62 trillion, their plans involve intricate webs of legacy businesses, complex trusts designed to last centuries.
Not to mention unique non-financial assets.
Exactly. And family dynamics that often span multiple continents and jurisdictions. The standard rules of inheritance they're entirely inadequate for this level of complexity.
So if you are involved in this transfer, if you're receiving it, planning it, or advising on it, you need the specialized playbook we're about to uncover. Okay, let's jump straight into the first major secret. And as you mentioned, it has nothing to do with tax optimization or some fancy legal structure.
Not at all.
It's about a core human failure.
Yeah.
Communication.
Exactly. We call this the communication crisis. The core problem, and this is identified across vast pools of data, is that the majority of wealthy families simply fail to discuss their wealth transfer plans with their heirs.
In any meaningful way.
In any meaningful way, yes. It is a communication breakdown, pure and simple. And it happens even in the most sophisticated, seemingly well-organized families with, top-tier legal advice.
Why is that? Why does that happen?
The parents tend to handle the transfer as a technical problem. They see it as a legal or a financial puzzle to solve, not a relational one.
And the statistics showing this silence, they're genuinely startling, especially when we look at specific high-value asset classes.
Yes, this is where it gets very specific and very real.
We're not talking about generalized financial portfolios here. We're talking about unique, often illiquid collections worth millions. The research focusing on collectors, for instance, reveals that 61% of wealthy individuals who own significant art collections have never discussed those assets with their heirs.
Never. Not once.
It's unbelievable.
And the silence is often only marginally better in the other cases. Another 21% of those surveyed admitted they had mentioned these collections, but only in passing.
So no real conversation.
No. No meaningful dialogue about the inherent risks, the, logistical practicalities of storage and insurance, the specific values, or what the parent actually wishes for the collection's future.
Should it be kept, sold, donated?
Exactly. The heirs have no idea.
So when you add those two figures together, you realize that a massive 82% of families with valuable art collections are going into this monumental transfer completely blind.
Totally blind. They have failed to prepare the next generation to handle these complex, valuable assets.
What's incredible is how wide this ignorance gap is when, the documents are finally read and it's all laid bare.
The gap is huge because the silence extends far beyond just art. It goes to the fundamental structure of the family wealth itself.
So heirs often have no idea what they're actually inheriting.
Absolutely no idea what the family wealth truly entails. They are often ignorant of the true scope of the family's assets. We hear stories of kids discovering their parents' own stakes in, half a dozen international companies they never even knew about. They don't know the reasoning behind specific allocation decisions. Why is a huge illiquid chunk of the estate tied up in a private trust in an offshore jurisdiction? Why is there so much exposure to certain alternative assets? They have no context.
And critically, they often don't understand the immense responsibilities that come along with that inherited wealth.
Sure.
It's not just a simple cash windfall, is it?
That's the crucial distinction. It's not a lottery ticket. They are unaware of the inherent ongoing responsibilities.
For example,
inheriting a significant stake in a family business means you're assuming board duties, potential personal guarantees on loans, governance oversight. Inheriting complex trusts means you have to understand fiduciary duties and navigate really complicated compliance issues.
So for an unprepared heir, this transfer isn't a gift. It's suddenly a very heavy, very demanding job they don't know how to do.
That's it perfectly. It's a burden, not a blessing.
And perhaps the most destructive aspect of this silence is the loss of the foundational principles, the values that built the wealth in the first place.
Indeed. If the wealth was built on specific ethical principles, or if there's an unspoken expectation of continued entrepreneurial drive or charitable engagement, and those values were never codified or discussed,
Now what happened?
then the inheritor may just treat the assets as personal consumption funds. The legacy dissolves into individual financial pursuits, potentially disregarding the very ethos the wealth creator upheld. The practical risk to the family legacy is immense.
That silence comes with a devastating quantifiable cost.
Yeah.
And we have a specific, just gut-wrenching anecdote that illustrates how financial and emotional value can be completely destroyed when communication fails.
Me too.
Tell us more about this infamous wine collection dispute.
This is a classic, tragic case study in the pathology of silence. So we know of a family where the father had spent decades curating a rare, high-value wine collection.
Okay.
Throughout his life, he had made different non-binding promises to his three children, specific Bordeaux for one, a vertical of Romanée Conti for another, and so on.
But he never wrote it down.
Never formalized these wishes in his estate documents or communicated a clear, unified strategy to his legal team and, more importantly, to his children all together in one room.
So when the father passed, those informal promises became weapons.
Precisely. The siblings immediately engaged in a bitter 3-year legal battle over the collection. And the value wasn't purely monetary. It was symbolic and sentimental, which made it so much worse.
I can imagine.
The dispute became so acrimonious. It involved specialists, multiple law firms, extensive litigation over conflicting claims, and just trying to interpret the father's casual remarks from years ago. The legal fees just escalated uncontrollably.
And the tragic conclusion was what?
The total legal costs ended up exceeding the collection's entire market value.
Wow. So they destroyed the very asset they were fighting over.
It was financial and emotional carnage. The consequences of this silence are not just, squabbling. They're asset disputes that force fire sales at inopportune times. They create missing or contested documentation, which can trigger massive tax liabilities.
And they generate emotional conflicts that permanently destroy relationships.
The so what here is stark. Conflict is the single biggest destroyer of inherited wealth. And that conflict is almost always born from a lack of clarity and communication that the patriarch or matriarch failed to initiate.
They work their entire lives to accumulate capital.
Only to let a small collection of rare bottles and an immense failure to just liquidate it all through litigation. It's a tragedy.
That terrifying anecdote leads us perfectly into the next layer of complexity we need to unpack. We need to move from the failure to talk about the money to who is actually inheriting it and, critically, what specialized assets they are inheriting.
Right.
This shift introduces two more secrets that successful families are forced to navigate proactively.
Secret number 2 highlights a massive demographic and societal shift. It fundamentally changes how wealth planning needs to be structured.
And this is what you call the gender revolution in wealth.
Exactly, driven primarily by the differential in longevity between men and women. We are seeing a fundamental and rapid change in who controls significant pools of capital.
And the scale of this capital transfer to women is just massive. It's challenging decades of traditional financial control. Let's look at the sideways transfer first. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So we're talking about $9 trillion expected to transfer sideways.
Sideways.
Meaning from a husband to a female spouse, rather than immediately down to the children. In most of these cases, the man was the primary financial decision maker and the main liaison with the financial advisors.
So when that wealth transfers to the wife?
She becomes the new financial captain, and she often brings a completely different set of values and priorities to the table.
And the numbers increase dramatically when we consider the full generational shift, right?
That's right. Beyond just the sideways transfer, nearly $40 trillion will flow specifically to widowed women in the baby boomer and older generations over the next 2 decades.
40 trillion.
This group is rapidly becoming the dominant capital holder and decision maker for a significant portion of this great wealth transfer. And if these women were previously relying on traditional financial advice, tailored for wealth preservation advice, often set up by their late husbands, they are now steering the ship.
With new priorities.
Often with a newfound determination to align their finances with their personal worldview.
This shift immediately changes the investment landscape because the priorities of this massive, newly empowered demographic are demonstrably different from the traditional male-centric wealth management playbook.
That is the critical insight that advisors ignore at their peril. When women in younger generations assume control, the traditional focus on steady, conservative returns and preservation, it often gives way to philosophies driven by impact, values, and transparency.
It's a shift from just making money to making money responsibly.
Perfect way to put it.
So how does that translate into portfolio strategy? What specifically are these new decision makers looking for?
We see a clear, data-driven push toward 3 major areas. First, they're demanding ESG-focused investments.
Environmental, social, and governance.
Correct. And for them, these factors are not optional. They are integrated right into the vetting process. They want verifiable, sustainable business practices from the companies they hold.
Okay, so that's number 1. What else?
Second, they often seek complex, longer-term thematic investments that align specifically with their values. So maybe massive, multi-decade commitments to global health infrastructure or climate change mitigation.
And this demands more active engagement, which is another key difference, right? They're not passive investors.
Exactly. This new guard doesn't want passive holdings managed by some remote fund manager. They demand transparency and direct knowledge of where their money is going and what kind of impact it's having. They are moving away from opaque traditional hedge funds that just prioritize sheer numerical returns.
And moving towards what?
Towards private impact investment vehicles where they can see the tangible results of their capital at work.
So the traditional hands-off, set-it-and-forget-it approach that defined wealth management for much of the 20th century.
It becomes instantly obsolete.
Because the new stakeholders require a much more active, values-driven relationship with their capital.
Absolutely obsolete. The status quo is fundamentally challenged. If a family's portfolio is historically built on, say, tobacco, defense manufacturing, or resource extraction that lacks modern sustainability policies,
right,
and the inheriting spouse or the next generation is deeply committed to sustainability or social justice, you have an immediate and powerful friction.
the money will move.
The money will move. It will either force the existing family office structure to divest and align with the new priorities, or the money will be taken to a different advisor who respects the new mandate. Financial loyalty often bows to ethical alignment in this new climate.
Okay, let's pivot now to what exactly they are inheriting. This brings us to secret number 3. The extreme complexity of specialized non-financial assets.
The asset nightmare.
The asset Nightmare. When we talk about $62 trillion, we're not just talking about liquid stocks and cash. We're talking about tangible, unique, often priceless objects with zero liquidity.
And families are terribly unprepared for managing their transfers. The problem with specialized assets, things that aren't traded on a public exchange, is their sheer illiquidity and the requirement for highly specialized knowledge that often, frankly, dies with the original collector.
And the scale is immense.
It's huge. Just consider fine art alone. Nearly $1 trillion in fine art is expected to change hands during this transfer. And transferring art is not simply a matter of updating a spreadsheet.
Let's detail those specific complexities because they really illustrate why generalist estate planning fails here. You mentioned documentation gaps first.
Correct. Without proper, verifiable provenance records, a clear ownership history, or up-to-date specialized insurance papers, the true value and legitimacy of a piece can be called into question.
So a simple documentation gap can cause huge problems.
It can lead to massive devaluation or, even worse, legal challenges regarding ownership, especially for pieces that have moved internationally. If the collector was sloppy with paperwork, the heirs bear all of that financial risk.
Then there's the logistical headache of the location mystery.
This is a major issue. Collectors often scatter their assets globally for security, for tax reasons, or because they're on loan. Heirs often have no idea where the pieces physically are.
Is a valuable sculpture on loan to a museum in Japan?
Exactly. Is a painting in a climate-controlled storage facility in Geneva. If the parent dies unexpectedly, that crucial institutional knowledge is it's gone, instantly lost.
And trying to track that down must be a nightmare.
It creates immense multi-jurisdictional logistical and legal headaches, not to mention unexpected storage fees, insurance lapse problems, or tariffs.
And then we circle back to that acute human element, unequal division and emotional conflict.
Yes, the difficulty of balancing the inheritance is acute because these assets are indivisible. How do you divide a single $50 million piece of unique art among 3 siblings equally?
You can't.
You can't. One heir might receive the art collection, while another receives a comparably large but liquid cash amount. But if the art suddenly doubles in value, or if the cash portion faces a massive market correction, the perceived fairness just evaporates,
fueling resentment.
Instantly. This demands extremely careful structuring and crucially clear communication about why these allocations were made to maintain overall equity.
And the emotional weight of art, unlike a share of stock, is often the flashpoint that triggers those legal battles we talked about.
The emotional attachments are often the final sticking point. The sentimental value of a piece, maybe it was purchased on a specific family vacation or it hung in the family home for 50 years, that can far outweigh its monetary worth to one heir.
Who sees it as part of their childhood.
Right. While another heir may view it purely as a complex investment to be sold immediately to fund a different venture. This clash of emotional and financial valuation complicates decisions far beyond what happens with a traditional stock portfolio.
We focused heavily on art. But the source material makes it clear that this specialized asset nightmare extends to so many other categories, doesn't it?
It does. Each carries its own unique risks that generalist advisors simply miss. The complexity extends to almost any unique, collectible, or physical asset worth significant capital.
Like classic cars.
Think about classic car collections. Incredibly complex. They require specialized maintenance schedules, unique titling requirements that differ by state and country, and expertise to avoid severe devaluation through improper storage.
Or rare books.
Rare book and manuscript libraries are another major area. These are often one-of-a-kind, non-fungible historical documents. Securing reliable insurance for a 17th century manuscript is completely different from insuring a building. It requires expert valuation that very few advisors can provide.
And even assets that seem simpler, like wine or jewelry, have these complex transfer protocols.
Absolutely. High-value wine collections can easily be worth hundreds of thousands to millions. They require extremely specific climate control, secure storage, and insurance that covers both theft and environmental damage.
And there are laws around shipping them.
Exactly. Specific interstate or international laws regarding alcohol shipment. Similarly, valuable jewelry and watches require expert appraisal and often involve emotional disputes over who should receive specific pieces tied to family history.
So ignoring these details isn't just sloppy planning.
It's inviting disaster. Because each specialized asset carries specific compliance, maintenance, and valuation procedures that have to be handled correctly.
Okay, we've covered the communication failure, the shift in who holds the purse strings, and the complexity of the physical objects they inherit. Now we transition to the final major secret we're covering today,
The big one.
the generational investment philosophy divide. This is the fundamental difference in how Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z view capital and the very purpose of their money compared to traditional wealth holders.
And this shapes the future of entire industries. This secret is the most market-shaping of them all because it dictates where all this capital flows next.
So when we look at the traditional old guard of wealth management, those who created the wealth in previous decades, their priorities were, well, pretty conservative.
Yes, very conservative, defensive, and focused almost entirely on optimization within a defined legal framework.
Can you summarize those traditional priorities for us again?
The mantra was straightforward. Steady, predictable returns, a hyper-focus on tax efficiency, and above all else, maximizing wealth preservation across generations.
You have to keep what you have.
The goal was simply to maintain the capital base, minimize risk, and ensure stability. There's a clear separation between the pursuit of profit and the pursuit of social impact. There were two different buckets.
But the incoming inheritors, they are not interested in separating those two concepts at all.
Not in the slightest.
Their drivers are fundamentally different, reflecting the values of generations that are acutely concerned with global crises, technology disruption, and a demand for corporate transparency.
Precisely. The incoming generations see their wealth as a tool for impact and change, not just a vault to be maintained. And we see four distinct, powerful priorities driving their investment decisions.
What's the first one?
First, and this is dominating the conversation, is environmental and social impact, ESG. This is viewed as necessary for future market stability, not merely a nice-to-have add-on. For them, ESG is a risk filter.
Okay. And second, they seem much more comfortable with volatility and disruption if it means access to transformative growth.
Exactly. They have a heavy focus on technology and innovation investments. They're seeking exponential growth in disruptive sectors, AI, clean tech, biotech, rather than the linear, slow growth of established industries. They are willing to accept higher risk for a higher systemic reward and impact.
And number three is about control, isn't it?
Yes. Direct involvement in investment decisions. They are digitally native, they expect transparency and access, they don't want to be passive recipients of a report, they want a seat at the investment committee table.
And they want detailed reporting.
Detailed, regular reporting on both the financial and the impact metrics.
And that fourth one, the demand for transparency and ethics, that seems particularly relevant given that they grew up in a world of immediate global information flow.
It's a complete game changer. The final priority is transparency and ethical business practices. They want to know precisely how their money is being made, and they expect the companies they invest in to adhere to extremely high labor and ethical standards.
This is a rejection of the old, opaque way of doing things.
It is a rejection of the complex financial structures that allowed prior generations to avoid accountability. If the family business or investment structure can't withstand scrutiny on these ethical points, the inheritors are increasingly likely to force a divestment or a restructuring.
Regardless of short-term profitability.
Regardless, they view reputational risk as financial risk.
This philosophical divide has massive so-what implications for the capital markets as a whole. It's not just a matter of changing fund managers, it's redirecting global capital flows.
It creates a fundamental economic shift. When younger generations controlling significant pools of capital and $62 trillion is a seismic force, consistently push for impact and ethics, the cost of capital changes across all sectors.
Walk us through that practical effect. How does that demand for ethics directly affect, say, an established traditional private equity fund?
Okay, so for established industries built on traditional models like resource extraction, heavy manufacturing, or private companies that lack modern ESG or diversity policies, the cost of capital will increase.
Why?
Because the pool of willing, large-scale investors, the inheritors, will shrink. Or those investors will demand a higher return premium to justify the lack of ethical alignment. It suddenly becomes harder and more expensive for those businesses to secure financing or find buyers.
And conversely, funding for the sectors the younger generations prefer, the innovative, sustainable areas,
It becomes cheaper and more readily available.
Right.
Precisely. Funding for ESG-focused projects, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and innovative tech becomes cheaper and more accessible. When the largest pools of incoming capital prioritize sustainability, it naturally drives investment towards those areas
Accelerating innovation.
and rewarding companies that align with these generational values. This transfer isn't just about moving money, it's a systemic redirection of capital that will reshape entire global markets over the next decade. Family offices that ignore this generational mandate will find themselves managing stranded assets that the next generation simply refuses to own. So now that we've thoroughly outlined the problems, the communication crisis, the gender shift, the specialized asset nightmare, and the philosophical divide, we shift focus entirely to the solutions.
The actionable playbook.
The actionable playbook of successful families, and the defining characteristic is this. Successful transfers prioritize the human foundation relationships, values, and education before they focus on the technical details.
The trusts, the tax strategies, the legal entities.
All of that comes second.
That distinction is so critical. I mean, you can have the most complex, bulletproof tax structure in the world, but if the beneficiaries hate each other, that structure will just be leveraged to initiate years of litigation.
And it will ultimately drain the wealth anyway. The structure fails if the family fails.
Exactly.
So we've identified 5 specific integrated pillars of practice that distinguish successful families from those who experience generational disaster. These are the steps that transform the family's relationship with their wealth from passive ownership to active, values-driven stewardship.
Okay, let's start with the one thing that addresses secret #1 timing. When should these incredibly sensitive, wealth-defining conversations even begin?
Pillar 1. Start conversations early. The most successful families recognize that wealth stewardship is a highly complex skill set. It has to be learned and practiced, not just instantly inherited on your 18th birthday.
So they start young.
They begin discussing wealth transfer, financial values, and responsibilities when children are in their early 20s or even late teens, often starting with smaller philanthropic decisions or managing a small trust.
So it's an ongoing process.
It's not a one-time meeting. It's an ongoing, evolving dialogue that adapts as the wealth and the family circumstances change. Early exposure normalizes the concept of managing complex assets.
But wait, isn't there an immediate risk here? The fear that if you discuss massive wealth with a 20-something, you instantly kill their motivation. Or worse, you breed an entitlement mentality that destroys their drive.
That is the #1 fear of wealthy parents, and it must be managed with strategy.
How do successful families manage that psychological barrier?
They employ phased disclosure. They start the conversation focused not on the amount of money, but on the responsibility and the values.
Oh,
They might first involve the next generation in the family foundation's work, letting them allocate capital and learn governance without revealing the full scope of the private wealth. They use the early years to teach competence, delayed gratification, and fiduciary duty,
making it clear that access to capital comes only after demonstrated maturity.
and an understanding of the family's values. This shifts the whole narrative from receiving money to assuming an earned responsibility.
That leads us directly to the second pillar, defining the why. If wealth is a responsibility, then the family needs a clear mission.
Pillar 2, create a family mission statement. And this has to be a living document, not just some legal formality stuck in a filing cabinet.
Right.
Successful families spend significant time, often with professional facilitators, developing clear written statements about their collective values, their philanthropic goals, and explicit expectations for stewardship.
So how the money should be used, preserved, and grown.
Exactly. So everyone understands not just what they are inheriting, but why the wealth exists and what their collective obligations are. This provides an objective, guiding framework for when emotional conflicts inevitably arise years later.
And if you are asking a 25-year-old to manage complex private equity holdings or sit on the board of a legacy business, you better make sure they have the education to do it.
Which is Pillar 3.
The competence gap we discussed earlier.
Pillar 3, provide financial education. Successful families actively resist the temptation to shelter the next generation from the realities of money management. They establish robust, active educational programs.
And this is not just a semester of economics in college.
No. This includes practical, in-depth teaching on investment principles for both private and public markets, understanding complex trust structures, navigating compliance and fiduciary duty, and managing liquidity events.
The goal is financial competence.
And independence. They must be prepared to question their advisors, to analyze complex deals, and to make thoughtful, long-term decisions, rather than being passive beneficiaries who are easily manipulated or prone to rash decisions.
The larger the wealth and the number of family members involved, the more complex and professional the management structure needs to be. That suggests the fourth pillar is essential for true multi-generational longevity.
Pillar 4. Plan for family governance. This is the structure that prevents the communication crisis from destroying the wealth. When wealth spans multiple generations, different family branches, and often different business interests, you must implement formal governance structures.
It professionalizes the relationship between the family members and the capital.
That's a great way to put it.
So what does that look like practically? What is a family council actually tasked with doing?
A family council is the primary governing body. It's usually composed of elected family members and critically independent professionals. Their role is clearly defined: managing the family office budget, establishing investment guidelines that align with the mission statement, overseeing philanthropic efforts.
And acting as a forum for conflict resolution.
That is the critical part. This structure ensures that decisions about large asset purchases, divestitures, or changing the terms of a trust are made collaboratively, transparently, and professionally.
Not emotionally in an angry email chain at midnight.
Exactly. So governance is effectively the institutionalization of fair process.
And you mentioned a family assembly.
Beyond the council, many Omplix families also establish a broader family assembly where all adult family members meet regularly, maybe once a year. This is where the education happens, where the family mission statement is reviewed, and where non-binding votes might be taken on issues that affect the family identity.
So you create a dedicated mechanism for addressing conflict before it spirals into litigation.
The structure protects the wealth from the family's own internal dynamics.
And wrapping all of this together is the foundational element, the meta secret, that sets the stage for every success.
Pillar 5. Address the human elements first. This is the core takeaway. Before diving into the technical aspects, the complex tax strategies, the intricate legal structures, the division of specialized assets, successful families prioritize relationships, open communication, and shared understanding.
They know the most brilliant legal structure will fail if the family relationships supporting it are fractured.
The technical aspects only succeed when the human foundation is solid and aligned with that shared mission.
Given how emotional money and legacy can be, why is using a neutral third party, a professional advisor, so incredibly crucial in these highly personal family discussions?
Professional facilitation is often the single most important decision a family can make. I mean, emotions and decades of unspoken family dynamics, sibling rivalries, resentments, feelings of unfairness from childhood.
All of it comes out.
It can instantly derail any productive internal discussion about money. A professional wealth advisor or a specialized family business consultant serves as a neutral facilitator.
They guide the conversation.
They guide it objectively, they ensure all voices are heard, even the most hesitant or quiet ones, and they help families work through difficult, sensitive decisions, like dividing sentimental assets or determining the future of a legacy business.
It transforms a potential confrontation into a manageable process.
It does. When everyone feels heard and they understand the reasoning behind the decisions, acceptance and long-term success follow, they take the family history and the emotion out of the structural decision-making process. So the essential takeaway here must be the urgency of the moment. The great wealth transfer is not some theoretical future event.
It's happening now.
It is accelerating right now.
Yeah.
And every day of delay increases the risk of those communication breakdowns, those painful family conflicts, and the missed opportunities for planning that could save millions in tax exposure or litigation costs.
So if you are listening to this and recognizing these secrets in your own family's structure, whether you're managing your own assets or anticipating a transfer, the immediate action isn't necessarily hiring the most expensive legal team or restructuring your portfolio this afternoon.
No, that's not step one.
The specialized knowledge we've examined today is crystal clear on this. The single most effective first step is starting honest foundational conversations with your family about values, expectations, and shared wishes.
It's that simple and that hard.
These crucial discussions require significant time to develop and maturity to execute. Families who begin this process proactively, perhaps with professional help, have tremendous, long-lasting advantages over those who wait until the transfer is imminent.
Or worse, after it has already occurred.
Right.
The investment in time, communication, and professional governance now can truly save your family from years of expensive conflict, emotional distress, and the liquidation of the assets they worked so hard to accumulate. Focus on the people, and the money will follow.
Our core insight today, the one thing we hope you walk away with, is that successful navigation of the great wealth transfer is ultimately about people, shared values, and strengthening relationships, not just optimizing cash flow.
It's the human element.
By focusing first on communication and establishing formal governance, families create the foundation for achieving both long-term financial success and deep family harmony across generations.
And as you reflect on the necessity of governance and mission statements in your own situation, whether you are dealing with $124 trillion or much less, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought for reflection.
Something to chew on.
It builds on this concept of values-driven stewardship. If you were tasked right now with writing a mission statement for the assets you own or manage, what specific values, beyond mere financial preservation, would you need to articulate to the next generation? What is the purpose of the wealth you hold? Think about the specific expectations and ethical standards you would need to commit to writing down, knowing they must survive you and guide your family's decisions decades from now.